Hello, and welcome to this edition of Uncommon Sense TV. My name is Andy Valeri, and I'm here again with my friend and colleague, as always, Mr. Ed Lacey, and we are here with the program to present information and perspectives in the ongoing effort to help preserve and strengthen our democratic republic. For today's program, we are going to talk about the Patriot Act. Now, that's the rather controversial legislation which was passed by our Congress and signed by the President of the United States, George Bush, in response to the attacks of September the 11th on our country back in 2001, which was claimed by our government at the time to have instituted much-needed reforms and upgrades in the processes towards law enforcement and being able to combat international terrorist networks. Now, that bill was passed on October the 24th, 2001, at least by the Senate. I think, when was it signed, Ed? Do you remember?
I thought it was October 24th was the signing date, but maybe
okay,
that was the Senate.
Maybe it was.
I'm not sure.
I know the Senate, it got through the House and Senate very, very quickly, which was only 6 weeks after September the 11th. That bill was crafted and submitted through the Justice Department in a very short period of time, only 3 weeks after the actual attacks. The first drafts were circulating amongst Congress, which was an amazing feat considering the size and the scope of that legislation. There's an individual, it has a little bit of an interesting history in the sense that it was basically drafted. The guy who oversaw it, Viet Dinh?
Viet Dinh is the guy who is responsible for putting all the pieces together. He was considered to be the author of the text.
Right. And
however, I think it's important to note that there were probably a lot of people who were working on this.
Right. Which we're
there must have been.
Yeah.
Look at it.
Yeah. When you get into this, well, this is a copy right here of the
People
Patriot
spend
Act.
years writing stuff like that.
Right.
3 weeks.
And we're going to get into more detail in just a few minutes about what is actually in this, what constitutes this huge document, the Patriot Act, which was, of course,
the USA Patriot Act.
Yes, which was pushed forward by, John Ashcroft, our Attorney General, as we all well know.
Yeah, here he is.
Which we can take a look at him right
Mr.
there.
Ashcroft.
And Mr. Ashcroft there was the biggest cheerleader and biggest advocate for this legislation. And Ed, what does that say? Fatwa?
I believe it does, yeah.
On that, what is what is that?
I am not sure what the context of this picture is, but it seems sort of like a personality indicator to me.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Well, actually, you could consider, maybe the Patriot Act might define itself as a sort of legislative fatwa on behalf of the Bush administration. But what is the Patriot Act? The USA Patriot Act is the official title of 2001, and the actual, what that is an acronym, and
it stands for.
You could read it right here.
Uniting and strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism, Act of 2001.
Well, that's quite a mouthful, right there.
Specifically, everything in it is only about terrorism. That's what the title says.
That's what the title says, but that's one of those really sort of kind of propaganda-given, names that they have for those things, which you often hear with our military operations these days.
I can see Bill O'Reilly now with a flag waving behind him and a huge echo box on his voice reciting the title.
Well, that's as you can see with that title, now they've got new ones, which we're actually going to get into those in an upcoming program because there's too much on this to talk about in this one show. But things like the Victory Act, which is a new one, as well as Patriot Act II and those things. But they always seem to come up, and those are all acronyms as well. They seem to come up with some real winners of they're clever.
There's a plethora of segments of legislation and legislation in general that are following in the wake of the Patriot Act,
right.
Many of which were originally put together as Patriot Act II, but which are now being stealthily slid in under the radar as much as possible, and we will be getting into that quite extensively in our next installment.
Yes, of this. Well, what the Patriot Act is, is it really something that's important for fighting terrorism? What is the effect of this legislation? What is actually in it? Well, according here to former White House counsel Abner Mikva, who served as a lawyer for the Clinton administration, he says it's a 342-page bill that changes our immigration laws, privacy laws, security, detention, the entire way the federal government treats its people. And this sweeping legislation does indeed do just that. It has all sorts of aspects to it that a lot of people are not really familiar with. And we're going to get, Mr. Mikva has some other observations we're going to get to shortly as well on what this is. But the idea of a sweeping legislation in response to a national crisis or a national incident is not a first. There was a time when, you can go back to, well, there's a picture right there of the Reichstag. The original Reichstag in Germany, that's early in the 20th century.
Kind of Belle Epoque building built in the late 19th century. And
the Patriot Act has, I don't want to say it's the same thing, but there's a reason why Bill Maher made a humorous comment about now that we have a German-speaking American politician, Arnold Schwarzenegger, maybe he can translate the Patriot Act from its original German for us. And he's referring to a thing called the Enabling Act, which was an act in response to the fire of the Reichstag, which was set on February 27, 1933. And again, we'll get back to the picture of the Reichstag there, which was burned by a guy named Marinus van der Lubbe, which was a literally semi-retarded, a mentally deficient Dutch communist who had hitchhiked who had come to Germany 2 weeks before the national German elections in March. And he was there to burn the Reichstag down. But the night before he was going to do it, or it was the week before he was going to do it, he was overheard by Nazi adherents in a German bar that he was going to do this. And they had told Goering, who was in charge of state security, and the Nazis used that. They found out this guy was going to do it, so they got in league with him, and they acted like they were co-conspirators. And what the SS did was they got involved in this to make sure they could do it, to burn this building that you see down. And the Reichstag fire, they busted him on site during the fire. They found this guy with no shirt on in the middle of it, having set this fire. But the Reichstag went up in minutes. There's no way one guy could have set a fire that would have burned that building down. It was a major job. And so Goering arrived immediately at the fire there in 1933 and said, quote, "This is the beginning of the communist revolution. Every communist official must be shot. Every communist Reichstag member must be strung up this very night." So Hitler then used that incident with rather diabolical brilliance, actually, and whipped the German people into a frenzy that the Reichstag, the symbol of German democracy and German, political power, had been attacked by the communists, and a response must be enacted immediately. So claiming it was that the burning down of the Reichstag was a sign of this massive communist plot to overthrow
against democracy,
against the German people, and he got Hindenburg permission to pass this emergency decree within the week called the Enabling Act, which suspended all civil rights in Germany. And then they went out and arrested over 4,000, quote, communists, whether real or alleged, to put